How you doing, folks? You're watching Onward with Onrie Live, and I'm your host, Onrie Kombat. I almost messed that up today. Today, we got a great guest in the house. This dude, I've known him a very long time. He's one of my best friends in the business. And the reason why I say that is because he has had my back for a very long time. And he has finally gotten to a point where he is releasing his first creator-owned book, and he's here to talk about it with us today. I am so excited about it. The premise sounds awesome. Everybody, please welcome Tom Kelly. Tom Kelly, how you doing, sir?
Hey, everybody. How you doing, folks? Woo!
Do us a favor. Tell us who you are, what you do, what you got going on right now, all right?
Okay, well, my name's Tom Kelly. I'm a Chicago-based comic book artist and illustrator. For years, I've worked for a lot of different companies, entertainment companies, known and name and low-level indie comic book companies, like the whole spectrum. And here, I'm here today to talk to you fine folks in Onrie about my new graphic novel. It's an original graphic novel. It's coming to Kickstarter July 1st, so just a couple of days. It's super awesome because it blends all the things I like all together into one thing. So my graphic novel is called The FOOT FIST FRANKENSTEIN. So it's I like to think of it as John Wick meets the Incredible Hulk a la Kung Fu Theater, because it blends the things that I loved as a kid and an adult all together in one, which is people like Bruce Lee and Kung Fu Theater and the Shaw Brothers films, with my love of classic movie monsters and action films. And then, the whole comic book world all, fused together into one beast that is the Foot Fist Frankenstein. So,
dude, I think it's going to be great. And I promise you I'm going to be like your first backer when you launch this thing, because I got to tell you, martial arts is it's pretty clear. Martial arts has had a very huge influence on me throughout my life. And is actually kind of like a centerpiece for my next project. So this is something I like. I like martial arts stuff, and I like you. So I know that this is going to be great. So, and I think it's a cool combination because all the things you mentioned here. It's just the thing I gotta admire. I say I gotta admire most about this is you've just taken everything you love and you've combined it into something really special. And you've been sitting on this idea for some time. You and I. We talked about this back in when was it November or December of last year?
Well, when we talked about it, which was November, December last year, I had already been I started this sort of journey from the inception to now where we are now in 2012.
Shit, so you've been sitting on this for a while.
Yeah, I came up with the idea. And then I started, kept developing the idea up over time. And basically, because you get ideas all the time, but you don't know if you're at the point where they're like seeds. Some take root and grow and some don't. And you just have to be okay with that. So I came up sort of with the idea. The germ came to me because I would read Hulk comic books or Superman comics, and neither one of those characters fight. They don't know how to fight. They just kind of show up. They're really, really strong and tough, but they don't Batman throws nerve, locks and flips and kicks. Daredevil is a martial artist. He's trained, but Hulk and Superman, they're just bruisers. They just kind of show up and they win because they're just tough and strong, and so I would sit there and I would think I wonder what it would be like if somebody was as strong as the Hulk or as strong or as tough as, say, Superman, but they actually were really well trained. That would be interesting. That'd be cool to draw. And then it would also be well, that's a fun story that I think would be neat to do. And so as I started developing it, I was Marvel Comics isn't going to pick up the phone for me and I'd be hey, I got a cool Hulk story. Let's go and do this. So I thought about what is a way I can make my own story, but still have a way to connect with people like easier, like have some sort of name recognition. And so I know, Frankenstein and the Frankenstein monster are in the public domain, so anyone can use them.
Right.
And also, the Hulk is partially based on Frankenstein and like partially based on Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. So I was like, well, really, I'm just kind of going to the source, like the core of the well for the character. So that's when I said, okay, this is something I really want to develop and work on now. And, growing up as a kid, I loved watching Bruce Lee movies, watching the Shaw Brothers films, things like American Ninja. I mean, I'm an 80s kid, so ninjas and kung fu and martial arts were everywhere. Like, Daredevil, you open up that, it's the hand and stick. Like the Ninja Turtles are big, like that's when they start to kick off. And then the other thing that was really, really big was horror movies. Like those Saturday afternoon matinees, whether they were like Hammer horror films or the classic Universal monsters like with like Lon Chaney and Bela Lugosi and stuff like that. So, it's all this stuff that I've really loved as since I was super young. And then I said well, I can take bits of all this stuff and put it together, and I think I can make something that's fun and entertaining and cool for me to draw, and just would work, really be something I would want to do, because I knew when you do create your own stuff, you have to make time for it. And life has a great way of making everything else push that creator thing off to the periphery. So you can only do it in little increments. Kind of I think you're tunneling out of jail with the spoon. You're just kind of every day you just tunnel and tunnel.
It's honestly, it really is how it feels,
Yeah.
And I got to tell you personally, that's the challenge I'm dealing with right now with my next project is I'm trying to make something that is, 100% mine, kind of like what you're doing here. And so I'm going to be asking you a lot of questions right now about what your spoon tunneling, your spoon shoveling, because that's what it is, dude. I mean, literally, here was my day today. I got up in the morning, I shipped out some books, I ran some errands because my kids got camp starting next week. And then I came home, and then I went up. I was just exhausted after doing all that. And I'm like, okay, now I have time to be productive. So I went and I sat outside and I read some comics. And then I just sat there and just stared off into space. And I didn't write anything down. I knew it's in my head, I was like, you're not being productive. And you're not being productive. You're just fucking staring out there, and fuck you for being like that. But, have you had moments like this? And if so, did you know that you were going to kind of come to the answers eventually? Because everything in me, there's still so many unanswered questions and so many things that feel wrong, and I'm trying to get to a point where it feels right to me, at least, because I think that's what it takes. It's when it all comes together, it feels right. And you're like, fuck yes, I'm going forward with this, where you are now. And where you are is a very exciting stage, because it's you're almost at the point now where you're not only realizing this, but you're actually going to be able to see money come in from this. And it doesn't matter how much at first from Kickstarter or whatever, you'll make your goal. But it's after that, that's when it gets really sweet. Once you start taking it to shops, once you get it distributed through Diamond, once you get it picked up by a publisher or decide to go to conventions and start slinging it, how was this product? Because again, 2012. So for 8 years, you were struggling with this. Struggling, I should say.
No. I mean, you actually have it correct. There was a struggle to it, because what happened was So I came up with the germ of the idea in 2012, and about 2013, 2014, I was at the point where I was like, all right, I'm going to start doing this, put pen to paper, pencil to paper, start laying stuff out. And that's when things started to go a little sideways for me in my personal world. Like, so early 2015, I was like, I was like into the flow of penciling. I had done like 4 pages penciled. I had my script like proto laid out. Everything was like thumbnailed out and all that. And in October of that month, my mother passed away. So you have to sort of drop everything that you're doing and go deal with that. So I put that down for, several months to deal with things because I live in Chicago and, I grew up in Pennsylvania. That's where the family home was. So I'd have to split time back and forth for months, like not only dealing with the grief and all the, funeral type things, but then clearing out the house and getting it ready to be sold and sort of going that. So you get like nothing done. I mean, for 2 months solid, my days were get up, I'd go to Pennsylvania, stay there for like about 2.5 weeks. I'd get up every day, go through each room, fill up garbage bags with stuff, like just books, magazines, and knickknacks that aren't valuable. They're just keepsakes. Or I mean, my parents were big readers, so they had tons of magazines and that stuff. And you just like whatever, you set aside boxes of what you can donate and then what you have to throw out. And like dawn till dusk, that's all you do.
And then good luck getting some fucking work done at the end of that the end of that day. And it's a tragic day too, because I mean, it's like I'm sure as you're going through all this stuff, you got
want to work because like everything's going to it. So you get through that, you get over that process. I mean, it's grieving. You go through that.
Of course.
Then 2016, I had hip problems. That's when I started getting hip problems. So I had to so in 2016, I got my left hip operated. In 2017, I got my right hip operated.
Fuck, man.
Right.
I didn't know about the hips. I did know about your mother, and I'm really sorry about that. I remember in 2015.
When I realized I would have to have surgery, it's not just the surgery, but it's also the physical therapy you do after.
Yep. Especially on the fucking hips.
Yeah, so the first, I want to say 5 weeks, all I was doing, I mean, you go to the day after surgery, you go and you do physical therapy, but it's 10 minutes you ride an exercise bike with no resistance. And you can barely do that. You're on crutches, you have a brace for your hip. And then the rest of the time, you literally are just lying in bed. You can't, people think, oh, I can sit up and I can, no, you can't. Because you're on a ton of painkillers and your whole mission is don't change the alignment, keep everything aligned so it can heal properly so that then you can be mobile. So it was really at that point I understood that I was okay, I can't physically draw this thing, but what I can do is I can do the only thing I can do is mentally try to plan out my promotional campaign and my Kickstarter and figure out rewards. You do what you can when you can. And you just sort of accept okay, I'm not drawing now. I can't do that. But what I can do is I can look at other Kickstarters. I can evaluate what I think is working for them. And I can sit there and rack my brains and say well, what would be a good reward that might not cost me a ton of money to produce? Or what have I seen that's worked and what isn't? So really in those periods of downtime when I really couldn't physically do anything, mentally I was staying active by sort of plotting the nenext steps ahead.
And that takes a lot of discipline, and it's a very hard thing to do because it's especially when you see other, because here's the thing I've kind of learned from doing my own Kickstarters is the success is never replicated. You have your measure of success, and then then you replicate that. Yeah. But if you look at somebody else's Kickstarter and it's this guy raised $60,000, you're not gonna. That doesn't mean that you're gonna raise $60,000. It also doesn't mean that you can't raise $80,000. But you better be fucking good. You got to have all your shit in line. You do
have to keep in perspective that's them and that's you, and you just I mean, for me, you and I were a little lucky in Chicago because there's a comic book community here. There's creators and artists who are on all different stratas, and that allows us to communicate with them and find out, like, get insights from like what they're doing and what worked for them or what wasn't successful. And, you know, you also can keep things in perspective. Obviously, you know, a high profile artist who works for entertainment, like major league entertainment companies, when they do a campaign, they're going to get a different result metric. They might get success faster and in larger amounts because they already have a pre-existing fan base, you know. But what you can learn is insights or like a lot of the pitfalls from talking to them of like, well, you know, I did this campaign, it was really successful, but I made this was a big mistake that cost me time or a lot more money that I didn't factor in. And, you know, those are the insights that are important to glean from.
I agree. And you know, Tom, the one thing I always got to give you credit for is just how eager you are to absorb information. And when I was first starting out in 2010, I developed my con circuit based off of a conversation we had, because you and I were just sitting down and I'm like, okay, what do I do from here? We were at a drink and draw and you were like, you know, you should go to these shows, this one, this one, this one. And it was, you knew this because either you had done those shows yourself or you had talked to people that had already done them. And I think that is already, that already puts you ahead in that regard, because it's like, once you have information, you know what to expect, you know how to kind of plan. And even when you and I sat down back in December, you had like your notebook out, you'd already talked to like all these different creators about what they had done and about what they had worked. And I think you were primarily more interested in talking to me about like printing. So let's focus on your Kickstarter for a minute, because I'm interested in finding out this. One of the things I'm fucking super jealous about you for is the fact that you are not only able to write, fucking bastard, but you can also draw, you fucking piece of shit. So, you know, you got everything kind of covered on the production front. So in terms of your Kickstarter, I'm going to assume that your goal is going to be to cover your print run, or is it, do you like, what is your goal with your Kickstarter?
The main goal with the Kickstarter for the funds is to cover the print run, the printing. I didn't like do things like some people factor in like their time and try to pay themselves that way. Sure. But that's the problem is even if you pay yourself $10 an hour, that's still a lot of cash that racks up that, you know, and again, like some people set high goals on their Kickstarter initially, and that's great. I mean, everybody should get paid for their work and their time and their effort. But I look at it like my perspective is if the Kickstarter is successful and I raise just the basic goal, then that will cover the cost of making the book, which then allows me to sell the book online, allows me to sell the book at, you know, shows, allows me to basically have a tangible item to even just show like publishers. Because, like, you know as much as I do, like, nowadays, like, portfolios are fine, but
having this makes a big difference. Having that physical book.
I made this. Here's me telling a story. Here's 120 pages of like me doing this.
Sure.
They may not think I'm perfect, but it's so much easier for someone to digest or even just take away and look at later. Like, reading scripts is hard because they're just words on a page. They're very difficult for people to read. Also, publishers won't accept unsolicited scripts. Like, they can't legally do that. That's to protect them. So in case something they already have in development is similar, like, I mean, how many zombie comics, like, there's a ton that exist, and many of them are similar. They're not the same, but they're similar enough because they're all playing on zombie tropes. So if you're DC Comics and you've got this idea for, you know, this zombie outbreak that Wonder Woman has to fight or something, and people just keep sending you in scripts with different superheroes fighting zombies, sooner or later, one of them is just going to match up very closely without people knowing each other.
Exactly. And, you know, there's plenty of situations that occur like this. And, you know, that's kind of the problem I'm facing right now with my next project is I'm finally diving into that realm of superhero kind of super villainish type of stuff. And when you get into that, it's like, what hasn't been done yet? It's not about,
they're based on tropes, right?
Exactly. So like, it's like if I introduce a character, if I introduce a character, people are immediately going to find some character to introduce him to or to connect him with.
Yeah.
You know, it just doesn't fucking matter. It's just, it's just what it is. And I think probably the thing that sets it apart, it's kind of like your pitch. It's what you do with it.
Yeah.
It's like you got, your book here, which is Frankenstein with, the skills of
Kung Fu Frankenstein.
Yeah, Kung Fu Frankenstein.
It's like imagine if Bruce Lee was Frankenstein. That's it. You know?
Yeah, exactly. And the premise is simple enough, but now it's about your execution with it and how you make it different and all that. So going into that, because not only are you a connoisseur of the business of comics, but you also read a lot of comics too. You read a shit ton of comics. So when it comes to your production method, what were your biggest inspirations to you throughout this process? Like what really pulled at you? Because martial arts, that's tricky shit. It's not just like here's the Hulk throwing a haymaker and knocking the thing back. You got to have like elaborate panels showing, kicks and punches and nerve strikes and all kinds of shit.
Forms, there's weapons. No, I mean that's a really good question. And basically what I did was again, because it was a long process, I was able to assemble a large amounts of reference. And a good resource for that for visual artists is Pinterest, because you can make just Pinterest boards, and those boards you can just throw all your reference, you can just keep looking at things and just keep throwing them in boards later, and then build up this reference library. But there were a few things I did, like every Inktober since about 2012. I would do some sort of martial arts theme for that month of October. So I was always making sure I was drawing a lot of martial arts. What I picked the first year I picked Ninja Turtles. Then the next 2 years after that, I did Street Fighter characters. And then this past year and this year coming up, it's Mortal Kombat characters. So there's a ton of fighting styles and tropes and weapons and stances. And to just reference Liu Kang, right? He's got all these, he's got the nunchucks, and he's got his little Bruce Lee shimmy stuff that he does. And then you have another character like Scorpion who uses that chain whip, And so what I would do is I do research on all of them, and it's little bite-sized chunks of reference that you gather, you just keep storing up. I looked at things obviously Iron Fist and Shang-Chi, and even other manga and anime, manga books, books like Blade of the Immortal, which is a very samurai manga. Then things lots of anime. But I also would revisit things like Bruce Lee movies, Shaw Brothers movies like The 36 Chambers and Flying Guillotine and things like that, as well as even stupid stuff like American Ninja or Jim Kata, right?
Dude, American Ninja is not fucking stupid. That was the fucking bomb. I don't give a shit what anybody says. Fucking American Ninja's the shit.
No, it's super fun.
Fuck yeah, Jackson, that dude's a bad motherfucker. Yeah, dude, fucking
Sugi's awesome.
Hell yeah, dude! All those guys. You kind of remind me of Joe. You kind of look like him a little bit, Tom.
Wow,
Well, it's funny you mentioned Shang-Chi because Dak, my co-writer on Eastern Shin, he always had me reference Paul Gulacy's work on Shang-Chi because of his his anatomy was very loose, like it wasn't even realistic, but the motions from panel to panel. And that's the thing, like when you're drawing comics, everything is static, right? It's not moving, but you want to give it this sense that it is moving. And, you know, one of the most gifted artists that had an ability to make things look like they were constantly in motion was Eisner. But, you know, in the sense of Eisner, you got, you know, guys like Galassi who could do the same thing. And, you know, Galassi was drawing based off of, you know, the stuff that was hot at the time, which was the Bruce Lee stuff. And, you know,
well, you see it 100% in Shang-Chi. Like you see like, oh, Bruce Lee is hot right now at that time period. And they're like, and Marvel's like, let's just do that. Everybody's into that. Let's do that. And they're like, okay. Because, I mean, some of the covers or some of the panels are straight up, like with the nunchucks and in those sort of poses that are, you know, Bruce Lee from like Game of Death or The Big Boss Man and, you know, things like that. And you're like, okay, you know.
You know what was really fun for me? I was reading it last year, was Jason Burrows and Max Bemis. They did a Moon Knight run.
Oh, yeah.
And the Moon Knight fight sequences were really well executed. Like, you know, I remember this double page splash where there was this big boat, and on the deck of the ship, Moon Knight was like kicking the shit out of all these guys, and what he'd had was these little inset panels that would basically almost have tails on, or they had tails on them, and they pointed to the smaller figures so that you could see them like breaking a dude's bones, or like, you know, punching the guy's face and like hitting him in the crotch, you know, all that kind of stuff. So yeah, that's, I mean, you got a wonderful, you know, source of inspiration to kind of help you along. And obviously this is a revenge story. So I'm looking forward to, and I'm assuming it's pretty, you know, pretty much related to the guy wanting to go after the people who turned him into Frankenstein. Is that kind of the premise of who he's going after?
You know, not exactly. My premise works as this. My book is the story of Frankenstein, like a month after the end of Mary Shelley's book. So the Frankenstein monster exists, and he's sort of just walking the earth. And
he's like Kwai Chang Caine, pretty much.
Yeah.
Okay.
And, you know, he's looking for a place. Yeah, he's looking for a place to find peace, and he finds like a Shaolin style monastery. And so, of course, you know, they take him in, and he's cool with that. And over the course of events, a warlord shows up, and the warlord doesn't like the monastery and the monks, and that comes into a conflict. And the monks, you know, long story short, the monks get killed. You know, everybody in the order is butchered, and you know, Frankenstein is left for dead. And then, you know, it's a very simple trope of like, now he's angry. Now he's like, all his peace has been shattered. That's why I say, like, with John Wick, like John Wick's this badass character who just really wants to be left alone. But then when the Russian guys show up and like steal his car and kill his dog and beat him up, that pushes him over the brink. So he's like, well, now I'm just going to find these guys. I'm going to kill them all. And that's really what like Frankenstein does in mine. Like, you know, he's at peace. He's happy. He's finally just left alone. He's on the top of a mountain. Nobody's bugging him. And then, you know, the world shows up, you know, a warlord who's really just got a problem. And that propels Frankenstein on now a mission of just like, I'm going to find this warlord. I'm going to go to his castle. I'm going to kill him. I'm going to kill all his soldiers. I am just going to house everybody, you know? And it's also like, it keeps it simple too. Like,
and I think there's a lot
to figure that out. Like I know why he's angry. I know why he's doing it.
Yeah. I think there's a necessity for simplicity, you know, like the way I'm looking at it too is like, all right, I'm diving into this whole superhero world. So it's like, all right, I got to be smart, right? I can't just do a superhero book. It has to be on that Watchmen level kind of a thing where it's like, you know, and it's not going to be Watchmen. It's not that, but it's got to be smart, you know? But at the same time, there has to be a level of simplicity to it too. And an example of why of how that's important is, I just finished editing a book that is going to be coming out soon, and the writer and we had a conversation on Sunday about the title, which he's been struggling with it for quite some time. And the original title he had, it just didn't work.
Yeah.
And then he just shot a bunch of shit at me, and then that didn't work. But then when we finally settled down on the title, which he came up with all on his own, it was like, yep, that's it.
Yeah.
You just got it. And it's simple. It was like, where the fuck was it? It should have just been there. It makes the work look easy because it's like, it's right there. It's like Occam's razor, the simplest solution is usually, or the simplest theory is usually the
correct one. Yeah.
Yeah. I can bring up the references. I just can't repeat them.
No, everyone comes up with a conspiracy theory, but really the truth is like, no, it was just, everyone was thirsty at the same time. That's how it worked.
Well, exactly. And you look at the Marvel movies too. Like, my son and we watched Endgame today because for some reason he just wanted to watch Endgame. And he was asking me all these questions, and I was like, see, this is why you watch Infinity War first, and then you watch Endgame. And he's like, no. But like, anyway, while we're watching it, it's like you watch the plot of that movie, and it's basically Infinity War repeated, but now it's like the good guys win this time.
Yeah.
But for a whole year between Infinity War and Endgame, we're like, what's going to happen? Like, what's the big twist? What's going to happen? Well, we all knew what was going to happen. It was obvious what's going to happen, but we didn't think about it because we were still like lying in anticipation of what if they changed something up? What if, something was a little bit different, which they still did. I mean, we all knew somebody was going to die in this movie and not come back, just like in the last movie. And, it all kind of came together in a pretty simple way, but I think there's something to be said about simplicity. Yeah. And that's something like I'm really going into because, as I'm reading more complicated comic stories, like I just read Strange Adventures 2 today.
Oh yeah.
Which I think, Tom King's just really knocking it out of the park. Both him and Mitch Gerrits are doing great with that. And I really enjoyed Mr. Miracle. It was the constrained feel of the book with the 9-panel pages throughout. Really, it wasn't done for a lack of ambition, or it wasn't done for a lack of vision. It was done on purpose, and there's the vision. There was the brilliance in it, and it's like you see that, and it's not that you want to compete with that necessarily, but you want to leave that same kind of impression on the reader where they're actually reading and absorbing and thinking about things rather than just kind of going through the process.
The interesting thing with Tom King, I think I agree with you. I think he's a very, very good writer. One of my favorite Tom King stories is actually it's just a standalone issue. It's a Swamp Thing issue, and it's a Swamp Thing in the winter. And he's just sort of it's just a self-contained story about like Swamp Thing having to fight this sort of weird winter monster. And it's all about like hunger and starvation and that. And it's deceptively simple, but it plays with like slightly more complicated things, as you unlock it, right? Because like for example, like with my story, right? Like Frankenstein, that's a loaded character. Like you take the stuff from that book and you can expand on it because like there's themes that you're never going to get away with, which are good. Like I make use of that in mine, like science versus, religion. That's a huge part of Frankenstein. And it's like, also like, it's interesting, like, like in my book, like, where he gets refuge, it's actually in a monastery. So there's like the religious aspect of like that's a religion that accepts him. Right. Whereas in, Mary Shelley's version, he's an abomination. Like he's unholy, basically. And then you have like the science aspect, which is like, he's not born. He's a product of science. But, and so people reject him that way. Yet, it's a push-pull of like what's good and what's bad. Like he's not bad for the way he was created. It's just that's the way he was created, right? And so like there's a there's a back and forth with that. Then there's also other things like in Frankenstein, Dr. Frankenstein is trying to become God. He wants to create life from like nothing, from scratch. So it's like science playing God. But on another level, Dr. Frankenstein wants to be a dad. He wants to be a father and create his own son, the monster. And you see how that's like a dysfunctional relationship because the minute he makes the monster, he doesn't like his son. Like he's disappointed in his son. He feels his son is a letdown. And, the monster, oh my God, like he's just born. He doesn't know what to do because he's just trying to be a good son. Like he's just trying to exist. He's like, you made me this way. And that's also the duality of like, well, Judeo-Christian religion, God made man and, man's imperfect. Yet man is striving to become like, another God. So, those are elements that I play within the story, fathers and sons and that dynamic, as well as like sort of nature versus nurture. Like what makes someone bad and what makes someone good. Like with superheroes, right? Like you could take someone like Batman. Like Batman, young kid, witnesses this horrible thing that happens to his parents. He then dedicates his entire life to fight crime and to fight that injustice. But I mean, you could take that little bit, like that violence that happened when he was really young, and that could make him a serial killer. So it's like it's the argument of like what you want to do and then how you want to set it up to tell your story.
I agree with that. And that's one of the things that I've been wrestling with, because part of the challenge, why am I doing superheroes? My very first comic was a superhero comic, and I released it back in 2005. And every time I look back on that book, I'm reminded of how much I didn't know back then. And it was my first comic.
Yeah.
And here's what happened with it, Tom. As soon as I finished the first issue, I took it to Wizard World Chicago, and I did pretty well with it. I sold like 100 copies of it.
Oh, that's good. No,
it wasn't bad, right? For my first show.
First book, yeah.
Yeah. But as soon as I was done with it, I was like, all right, I'm done with this. Now I want to make it better. I'm going to redo issue 1. Rather than move on to issue 2, I redid issue 1. And I got done with issue 1 with just the rewrite. And about halfway through, I decided to fire the artist, which was just really stupid on my end. I made a really bad mistake. And then I hired another artist, and I started again from scratch.
Yeah.
And kept going again. And then that artist he quit. He quit because he didn't have time. So finally it ended, and I stopped, and I'm like, you know what? This isn't working. So I had to like think about what wasn't working. I spent a lot of time. And then I came across Yi Sun Shin, and once I learned about his story, I abandoned this project. So the challenge for me now is going back, revisiting this, and now I got plenty of time to work on it. At least I like to think, I should have plenty of time to work on it with everything that's going on. But it's just the challenge that I have is just actually like diving into it and actually being able to get to the fun part of actually producing stuff, of actually like coming up with those scenes. But I think like behind it is that hidden philosophical layer that needs to be there. It's in every story. And if it doesn't have it, then you got a flat story that no one's going to give a shit about. And it's got to weave itself in there to the point where readers know it exists, and if it doesn't need to be, you don't need to be smacked in the face with it. You just need to see that it's there. And that's the beauty of comics, I think, is that, it is very much a visual form,
Oh yeah, no, I totally agree. And I totally feel and sympathize and understand, that journey that you went through with that first comic. Because everybody goes through that, right?
Yeah, and it's like I'm like reliving the nightmare of it now. It really that's what the last like I really want to break free of it and just get back to the convention scene, because it's like I don't want to face it. It's
well, I mean it's challenging because Yeah, I mean, like,
and I can't imagine what you went through too, because it's like here you were,
well,
in recovery for hip surgery, and you're like, all right, I can't draw, I can't fucking write, I can just think about shit in my head and
yeah,
lay here all day while everybody else is out working, making
yeah,
money, doing shit, and that's another thing that's killing me too. It's like while I'm sitting here, thinking and doing nothing, you got guys like fucking knocking shit out. They're making comics. They're knocking scripts out. They're doing it, and I'm just sitting here twiddling my thumbs, and it drives me nuts. It's like we time is fleeting,
yeah. But I do also think that, like, it's one of those things where, like, trying to do, you can do things too fast. You can do things too quick and too fast, because it's like, I gotta go. I can't sit idle. I've gotta, be there. I mean, look at, like, martial arts tropes. How many times have you seen it in a martial arts movie or film? The young monk, the young initiative shows up to the master, right? Like Luke Skywalker meets Yoda, and he's like, man, I want to be a Jedi. Show me what to do. And Yoda's just sitting there, just like making soup really slow. Like, okay, well, we'll start your training. Well, what do I do? I was like, well, pick up those rocks. Like the Karate Kid, he's like, sand the floor and paint the fence. Everything. I do think there's a part of, like, everything you do every day is part of your journey and preparation for everything that you do next, right? So while it seems a lot of times, like, I mean, for example, like, people will sit there and say, like, when they run or when they first go to the gym, like, everything is so hard in the gym, right? And every day you just push yourself. I mean, you go to the gym, you work out, and then you're like, that was exhausting, right? A month later, or like 6 months later, you've been keeping a record. You've been tracking, like, how much weight you lift or how much you run, and you never seem like you're really making goals. Like, you never really seem like you're making a lot of progress. But when you look back to where you first started, you're like, wow, I went from, like, here to there.
It's a very good point.
And I mean, especially, like, you especially see that in, like, sports. And the difference is, like, if every day, I mean, this, like, you do push-ups. Every day you do push-ups and you get a little bit stronger. But it's not like tomorrow you went from doing, 30 push-ups to doing 500 push-ups. It's an incremental journey. And what we all have to tell ourselves is to be patient with ourselves and let us get stronger at our own pace.
I agree with that. It's hard.
It's hard to do that.
It really is.
Because you always seem to see someone who's faster, stronger, maybe they're more talented, or not even that. Maybe just see somebody who seems to have an inroad for some reason, and you're like, well, why didn't they pick up the phone for me? Like, like how come I didn't get that exploit? Like, most of the time people always compare breaking into comics as, like, breaking out of prison.
Yeah,
like,
well,
as soon
exactly.
As you find a way, they close it down. Like,
absolutely.
Now we're just sealing that off,
Well, I got two things I want to say. The first thing is this: San Diego Comic-Con. We have shared hotel rooms over there. We have spent many evenings together at parties and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And that's a show that really beats us all down.
Yeah.
But
it's a beautiful show, yeah.
Honestly, you have always been the guy that has helped me keep my morale up at that show, and I mean that sincerely, man. Like, you've really helped me get through that show on certain years, because you feel invisible. It's like it doesn't matter what you did on the floor during the day. It doesn't matter if you sold, like, fucking so many books or whatever. Like, I remember I had an experience with the publisher, and I went and pitched the publisher. I left the floor for 2 hours to go pitch a publisher. I won't say their name here, but, I speak with the guy, very well-known publisher, and I just sold 400 books that day. And he was like, here was his reaction to that. Isn't that great that you can do that here at this convention? As if, like, it was nothing, like as if everybody had done this kind of thing. And it just made me feel so small, and I felt like shit. But then I remember that night, here I am talking with you afterwards, and you just helped me kind of, like, take that off. You were like, whatever, dude. Everybody's here promoting their shit. Don't even take it personally. It's just not a big deal. It's just whatever. And we had a great night, you know?
I mean, that environment is like everybody selling to everybody.
Yes.
And,
exactly.
And for the people, like, I try to explain this to people who know me who don't know like that what that show's like. Like maybe they've seen like Wizard World Chicago or C2E2, and they're like, well, is San Diego like C2E2 only bigger or like what? And I'm like,
it's different.
Yeah, like it's a totally
just different
because it's like you're going to like Sundance Film Festival or something.
Yeah, yeah. Like, you're going to like every
the minute you get off the plane, you're at you're at
it.
Like
yes.
The airport luggage tag has a San Diego Comic-Con sticker on it. You get into the cab and you're already getting ads for Comic-Con. The banners are up. You're there on Monday. The show isn't going to start until Wednesday, and it won't be over until next Monday. And you're like, well, here we go. All right, here we go. And
it's an overwhelming feeling.
And it's a wall of people. And, for me, and this was always my experience, and I think this is similar to what you experienced, is that we work that show. When we're there to sell our products, to meet and make contacts with people, and really just basically promote ourselves and what we're doing. We're not trying to get into Hall H to see the new Avengers footage. We're not trying to get a super exclusive toy. Like, we're not trying to get the SHIELD helicarrier or some limited edition magic card or see the reveal of who the next MK11 character is going to be, right? Like, that's not what we're about. And like for example, like I've had to go across the convention center just to talk to different editors, like in a conference. I
remember you telling me this too, like, and how much of a pain in the ass it was just to get from one side of that fucking floor to the other. It's fucking crazy. And New York,
and you're constantly fighting a sea of people, right? Who are like, you're like they're all salmon, they're going one way, and you're like the one minnow who's just like trying to get through. And I'm like, I'm not trying to keep that fan from anything they're trying to do. But they're all in my way just to get to like a meeting room that they do not care about. Like it's some room in some back of that convention center nobody goes to. And they're all trying to get to, the Marvel booth because Chris Evans is signing. Or they're trying to get like a specialty limited edition toy that just opened up at like the Lego booth or something. And that's fine. Like, it's cool. But you really do feel like, man, the whole world is against you, right? Because you're just going against the flow. And yeah, like by the time you get to like the bar or dinner or whatever, you're just like, oh, I hate this place so much. Like, why? Because it's like, why does it have to be that hard? You're not trying to keep it. Like, it'd be different if I was in front of all those people going like, hey, stop, like, buy my thing. But it's like, no, I'm like, I just want to get around you. I'm not trying to be in your way. I'm not trying to be there.
And the frustration of that fucks with your mojo a little bit too, because it's like you're frustrated, and then you got a meeting, and it's like,
well, yeah, I mean, you're also like, you don't know how early to show up to some place because you're never sure how long it's going to take you to get from point A to point B. And you don't want to seem flustered. You want to see, like, when you sit down,
I'm happy to be here. Right, fucking yeah. A.
You got to put on your total game face and be like, hello, I'm about this. And, meanwhile, you've, fought your way through 40 million different, vendors and bottlenecks. And that's only a small fraction of the show. Like, there's just so many other peculiar things that, like, can make it a challenge to enjoy the space you're in.
God, I fucking miss it though, man. That's the hardest thing. And here was the second thing I wanted to mention to you, because you were talking about, changes that we see in ourselves. And my family and I, we went to Tennessee last week, and we were down by the Smokies. And my wife, she found this really great hiking trail. So we went hiking, And I didn't even break a sweat for like the first like hour because like, you know, for the last like year, I've just been working out like a lot.
Yeah.
And she was like, wow, you're moving so fast. Like you're doing such a great job, like so consistent and everything. Then this one dude is just straight up running uphill the mountain, and he just like fucking passes me, like as if like I'm a bitch, you know. And like I was walking and was proud of myself. This guy was fucking running up this motherfucker, and
So,
that's how it is. It's going back to what you were saying.
So years ago, I was out visiting a friend of mine in Colorado for his 30th birthday. And so we went hiking. We climbed a small peak in Colorado. You know, you just hike up.
Beautiful over there. I fucking love Colorado.
But like you're at altitude, like so air's already like thin. Like it's draining you to get up there. And you know, we get up to the top, and it's a beautiful view, and you have this great sense of accomplishment. And as we start walking down, I see this like elderly couple. Like literally just like just walking right like up past us. And I'm sitting there going like, this was me and all my friends when we were like 30 and in great shape. And I'm like, man, this climb was kind of brutal. And I'm watching this like elderly couple get up there, and like your sense of accomplishment really gets crushed. Because
it really does.
Oh, man, like you didn't climb Everest, you just hiked up a mountain. Right?
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's the way to look at it too, is that, you know, it's really your journey, because even though they can climb up that mountain faster than you, there's something that you're better at than that they can't do. Like I'm sure those people couldn't put together their own comic like you can. Well, you know what I mean? Or
perspective. I mean, these people probably go out every day and do that. You know, and they've probably done it every day for like 50 years of their life. So it's like, you know, there is a perspective of, you know, it's like, I'm sure you see this with your kids. Like when you play video games with them, they want to win. Like they want to be.
Oh, are you fucking kidding me? Yeah, right. Me and my son, we were just playing this this really fun game. They finally started making fun games again, where you basically it combines driving and soccer.
Okay.
So you're like in these cars and you hit this big metal ball into like a goalpost, and it's fucking awesome. Yeah. And we couldn't win. The first 2 rounds we played as a team, we couldn't win. And then we just won the 3rd round, and it was, but he always wants to win.
Yeah.
Always wants to win. And I never fucking let him win either. I kick his ass all the fucking time.
That's the nature. Well, I mean, that only lasts for so long. You know,
it does. Well, it makes them better.
Meant is that like eventually they get tougher and stronger and faster.
Well, that's the idea. Is you want them to get that. You want them to do that, because then it becomes funner. Then, you know, like I was playing chess with my father-in-law, and he's fucking amazing. I mean, he fucking beats the shit. Yeah, I have never once in the 10 years that I've known this guy, 11 years that I've known this guy, I have never once beaten him in chess. He's always fucking just wiped the floor with me, and because he's been playing all his life, and like what I play casually. And the last time he whooped my ass, he lectured me. He said, "You need to play chess more. You need to get involved more." And I'm like, "Fuck you, motherfucker! I'm gonna beat your ass next time."
Because like it seems like it's condescending, but really what he's saying is like, it's just like any sport, right? The more you do it, or any activity like writing, right? The more you write, the better you get at writing, because you think about it consciously and subconsciously, like instinctually. Like, and it's the same with drawing. Like as you sit down, you draw, you don't think about things as much. Like you concentrate on what you're doing, but you have more and more muscle memory and years of experience accrued back up in your head that comes out instinctually. And you know, it's like when you hear like all the times, you know, I've gone to a million panels and shows, and I've been in those panels and listened to people ask creators like, how do you become a better writer, or how do you become a better artist? And they almost always say, you just got to do it. You just got to keep writing, and you got to keep drawing. Like that sort of 10,000 hours, right? Like you just keep doing it, and you incrementally get better, and your average increases. So every time you sit down and do something, you're already at a certain level and you're getting a little bit better at it every time. And so when you meet somebody who's really good at chess, they played chess a lot. And not only did they play chess a lot, they played it probably competitively, like tournament level. They play it online, they play it in person. And they've also studied the game, the tactics in the books.
They study chess like I study porn sites, which is all for research.
Right.
Everybody's watching. It's all for research.
Right.
I don't watch porn for any other reason.
Yeah. The articles. It's about
the articles. Yes, the articles. Thank you, Tom. Even in the videos, there's an article hidden in there. You just gotta look. You gotta look really hard.
Yeah, it's a treatise. You really gotta squint, but it's there. Yeah. But no, it's that sort of 10,000 hours. Like you just, because people like I've listened to like a lot of times when I've listened to people talk to different writers, and they'll say like, well, what do you do about writer's block? And I remember I was at a library here in Chicago, and Neil Gaiman was talking, and he was talking about that, and somebody asked him that, and he was like, well, you just get in the habit of disciplining yourself to sit down and write, whether it's 5 pages a day or 6 pages a day or whatever, a specific sort of pace for you. And he said, if the story you're working on isn't working, just keep writing, but write another story. And he was like, this book that I think at that time it was American Gods that he was promoting. He's like, I did this book while I had writer's block on another book. And he was like, no, he sat down every day and he wrote. He just was blocked on his one story, so he just started writing another. And then he ended up like having a whole other book before the other book, the first book he had been working on was done. And I think that's interesting in that, like, in art, they always try to, art professors and art teachers and artists always say, like, have a sketchbook. Always carry a sketchbook with you. Always be drawing in it. Because, whether you're at a bus stop or you're out in a park or, you can take a couple of hours out of your day, you're skill building, but you're also collecting data around you. Like, oh, I'm drawing a telephone pole today. Now I'm drawing a car. Or like, and you're like, why is that valuable? It's like, well, you're putting in so much more time just drawing everything around you that when you do start to have to do something purposefully, like, oh, draw, a Corvette, right? Okay, you're like, well, I've drawn cars before from sketching, and I will get all this reference of Corvettes, and then I'll sit down and I'll do a technical work of it, But you've done a certain amount of legwork by having yourself always ready to draw, or always be like, okay, no, now this is the 3 hours of the day or 2 hours a day that you write. It doesn't matter if what you're writing is specifically for that one goal that you have, or just be like, no, I'm just writing a story. Now I'm writing a children's story because it was a fun exercise that day. But it might free up your brain. Like it might, like when you're not consciously thinking of things, sometimes it unlocks stuff and you're like, oh, that's the solution. Because you'll be like, oh, this is the story about, I don't know, the spider that liked to make donuts or something, right? Just a silly, children's story. But as you're working at that, you might get a solution for a crime story you're working on, or it might give you a little tangent that you're like, oh, that's not good for a children's story, but I can use this now in, my adventure story or whatever. And like, I know with me, like, I try to work out every day, and I try to, go jogging every other day. And so that's like 30, the jog is like, 35, 40 minutes. And, in that time I'm listening to music and I'm really just inside my head. And also, sometimes it's stupid, nonsensical stuff that comes to you. Other times I'm listening to a podcast and I something they say puts me in a tangent. And then other times you're like, oh, that's a cool idea. I'll do something with that, or I should try to explore that more. So yeah, I do think there's a value of consciously letting go and switching off in your downtime. Whether, for you, it could be you playing with your kids. Like, you're in the moment, you're playing with your son. You want to beat him in the, car golf game or other things. And like it's you ever we've all had these moments when someone asks us like, hey, do you remember that actor who was in that TV show with Ed Asner? And you're like, yeah. And you can't think of the name. And then when you're doing something else in your kitchen, the name will pop into your head. The name will just like go boop right there, and you're like,
that's and that's usually how it happens. Tom, we're at the end of the show here. Okay. I want to give you a chance to give us a final shout out. Tell us where we can find you, and all that wonderful stuff. And here, take the center stage, my friend.
Well, basically the main thing, you can find my graphic novel, Foot Fist Frankenstein, on Kickstarter.com. It goes live on July 1st, and it'll be active the whole month of July. So you can go to Kickstarter in the comic book section and look up Foot Fist Frankenstein. It'll be right there, and it'll give you tons of information about the book, the story, and all the cool rewards that are in there. If you want to follow me, you can follow me on Instagram, which is Tom Kelly Art on Instagram. My main website is my DeviantArt page, which is tomkellyart.deviantart.com. You can also follow me on Tom Kelly on Facebook, as well as Tom Kelly Art on Twitter.
Awesome.
So those are most of the ways you can check me out. And yeah, definitely look for Foot Fist Frankenstein on Kickstarter in July. It's a super fun book. I had a lot of fun creating it, and I think you guys will have a lot of fun like looking at it and checking it out.
And one last thing I wanted to say, just from talking to Tom for the last hour, you get a sense that this guy understands the philosophy and everything that makes martial arts like awesome, and that's all going into your book. I just know it. I'm so excited about it. Tom, do me a favor. Hang out backstage because I definitely want to chat with you. I just want to wrap up real quick. Oh, sure. Thank you so much for coming on the show, my friend. What a great episode. Tom is one of my favorite people, and now you guys know why. And I'm telling you, I made a promise to him, and I'm making a promise to you guys. I'm going to be his first backer on his Kickstarter. Mark my words. The second it goes live, I am going to be his first backer. So thank you so much for tuning in, guys. Great guest. I'll be back next week. We got some really interesting guests, some inside of comics and some outside of comics. So I'm looking forward to talking with them and learning more from them. And I'll see you guys next week. Do me a favor, if you haven't yet, hit that subscribe button. Check out my Patreon too. Donate, because we're starting to come across a problem now with StreamYard, the platform that we're using to host these videos. Am I pointing in the right direction? No. Yeah, it's right there. See StreamYard right there? So they're basically telling me that my episodes are so long that I got to upgrade the program I got and whatever. And it would really help out a lot if you guys donated to our Patreon, because then I can pay for it. And once you pay for the higher tiers, you can start to do all kinds of cool stuff on through StreamYard, which I can use to help promote the guests I have on the show even more, and a bunch of other wonderful stuff. So I will see you guys next week with a brand new episode. And until that time, onward to victory.